Otherwise, very precisely because calculation cannot and should not provide a definite answer. For scientists and equally for lawyers, truth is measured on a positional scale of probability. So, aesthetics, as the judgment of the senses, is thus what rearranges the field of options and the perceived likelihood and cuts through probability economies of calculation. The word conviction could thus draw a line between the legal verdict of guilty and the subjective sensation of confirmed belief, right? The relation between affect, which has an aesthetic foundation, and a legal rendering of guilt. So decision relies on aesthetic concern, that is, on the way and order by which things and events appear to us, a delicate aesthetic balance of new images made possible by new technologies, affecting the things that we see and can comprehend. So instead of a trial of a living person, as intended by the different states and teams that came to look for him, the process that led to Mengele's identification could be thought of as something akin to the trial of the bone, undertaken not within a legal but within a scientific form, within a laboratory. Poetically, though, it was as if an inverted version of a Dantean punishment, one that sees the sinners in Inferno castigated by being afflicted with the endless repetition of their own crime, was now afflicted on Mengele's remain. The skull of the phrenologist, I mean, you all know that Mengele was a doctor and a phrenologist in Auschwitz, right? This doesn't need to be repeated here. Whose 1935 PhD dissertation investigated racial morphological research on the lower jaw section of 4 racial groups, had become the epistemic problem of real science, and perhaps even the most studied, contested one at the time. So his own skull is the one being now most handled after he does this research on skulls. It's kind of like a strange way to think, no? Eichmann, the bureaucrat, is opening the era of the witness, and Mengele, the phrenologist, the era of forensic aesthetics. In order to create conviction that these bones were that of Mengele, they needed an image. So they go through, they analyze the bones, they compare, and they get to kind of like beyond probable and very probable that the skeleton is that of Mengele. But outside the lab, stand the press, and behind them, the survivors that have to be convinced. They want to see Mengele alive. They do not want those bones to be. This is not enough to convey to people the balance of probability. They needed an image, needed an aesthetics eruption to fracture that fuzzy forensics of probabilities. And the image was one whose conditional, technological conditions of existence had only recently matured. It was created by a member of the West German team, Richard Helmer. Another great gravedigger, the second of this lecture. This is Richard Helmer, who was also an amateur photographer and has recently started to experiment with a technique that merges photography, or more precisely a videography of photography, with the science of pathology. To begin with, Helmer had to rebuild the skull, which has been badly damaged by the Brazilian police in the hasty exhumation. And then, on the skull, as you see, he's putting about 30 pins. These are the pins, and each one of those pins, based on technique that were developed, in fact, originally for the identification of Johann Sebastian Bach, in Germany at the end of the 19th century measured the average distance between the skin and the bone. A few millimeters here, or if you're me, a few centimeters in other places, right? This is different. And you need to know how the face hangs on the skull and these pins. So Mengele skull becomes like a pin cushion with the white tip of the pin marking the location of the skin. You can see the pins. In here clearly you see the pin is kind of, you can screw it up and down along that screw. Then two objects are put one next to the other, a photograph and the skull, and two video machines. This is the 80s over here, rather early videos. One photographs the skull, and the other photographs the photograph. And then through a mixer, these two are combined onto an image. It could be split, as you've seen yesterday. I mean, very consciously, I'm taking a slightly different route for the very same concept that Hito presented yesterday. Quite comical images, aren't they? This is my favorite one. The skull wearing a hat. So Mengele's skull becoming this sort of historical image around which sensibility turns and through which other skulls start speaking. That is the press conference where you can see that what ruptures that kind of simple balance of probability is that image that emerges. And I like that image for several reasons. One is that it's obvious that the skull is now giving a press conference. The microphones are directed at the skull. But also the sort of Getty images watermark on it shows you the forum by which the skull now speaks. This person is simply the interpreter of the language of bones to the language of people. And this investigation, in fact, marks the moment in 1985 where pathology becomes something of a popular entertainment. Right? That story is on a TV and on newspapers every day throughout the weeks of the investigation. Pathologists become media figures, right? It's a Life magazine image of the great grave diggers who identified Mengele. So Mengele case mark the entry of these pathologists into an expanded public domain that was soon to include and had to find ways to deal with many more skeletons and human remains. Contemporary war crime forensics began in Brazil with the perpetrator and in Argentina with the victims missing. In a strange but clear sense, the Mengele investigation was structural, not just like, was structured just like a search for disappeared. As a problem for the police and for science, Joseph Mengele was one of many missing people who were missing in South America at the same time. It was this methodological proximity which allowed the technique developed for the former to suit the latter so well. For forensic scientists seeking identification, the difference between the perpetrator and the victim is, of course, non-material in the full meaning of the term. The skull of the perpetrator, like that of any missing victims exhumed from unmarked grave across South America, starting in the 80s, is simply made of bone tissue. The investigators ask each the same question: who are you? The exhumation of Mengele places thus the category of the missing beyond the ethical categories of victims and perpetrators. This is Argentina, Ethiopia, Guatemala, I just came back from. But now I'm interested in a moment after identification or misidentification. Yesterday spoke about those slippages and the agency of the non-identified. The unidentified still haunt the political process in a way that keeps it open, while the identified would be those based on whose remains conviction could take place, right, if they are. Here I'm interested in the dissolution of the bones and their return to landscape and materiality. Right? So the osteobiography continues. The osteobiography does not end with identification, the return of the bones to the family and burial. The osteobiography continues in the dissolution of the bones into the landscape. And here, what you see is an object I once prepared, where what you see is the topography of a mass grave. So airplanes go over areas in Kurdistan, Iraqi Kurdistan, Afghanistan, other places where they look for mass graves, and scans the terrain. And if they see a topographical form that does not conform to the way in which water moves onto rock or land, there is a disturbance in topography that is investigated. Here, the story is written in the minute details of topographical forms, on the sagging or the swelling of that mass grave. You see the edges of it sagging, the center obviously swells and rises to the With the urbanization of conflict, architecture, and I take architecture as a field of investigating space in general, buildings, has become the pathology of our era. I showed you at the beginning in the kind of the ruins of the places in Iran, how architecture becomes the built or destroyed, becomes the depository of history in a kind of immediate archaeology that is done on satellite images. Geospatial data, maps and models of cities and territories, the enhanced vision of remote sensing, 3D scans, air and ground sampling. In high-resolution satellite imagery, we draw the surface of the Earth in variable resolutions from the bottom of seabed to the remnant of bombed-out buildings. The surface of the Earth has a thickness, but it could not be considered a volume. The Earth is a surface thickened by relation. So I'm working now as another, we're moving from an object, very bounded object, like a skull, into surfaces, materialities, flow, into minerals. And I call it the surface of the Earth because for me a thick surface, which is technically a volume, but conceptually a thick surface, because in my conceptual perception, the volume has layers, and the surface has a constant contiguity and continuity in which every point along it